Welcome to the FAWN Cold Protection Toolkit. The FAWN Cold Protection Toolkit is a suite of decision-making tools that provides guidance with using water for cold protection, by first assisting with determining critical temperatures, examining short-term forecasts, then with evaluating various factors related to individual cold events. The results of each component of this toolkit apply primarily to FAWN sites. However, several will provide results based on measurements you can submit from your own location. FAWN highly recommends that you compare over time measurements from the closest FAWN site to measurements at your location to determine if any typical variations exist between the two. This will enable you to better apply the results of a tool to your location when the option to submit your own measurements is not available. The first step in the cold protection process is selecting a critical temperature for the crop of interest. If you know the critical temperature for your crop, simply select this link, enter the value, and press Set. This value will be applied to all components of the toolkit. If you need assistance selecting a critical temperature, use our guide for determining critical temperature. At the bottom of this page, there are links to information on selecting a critical temperature for various crops. Back on the main page, the next step in the cold protection process is finding out which upcoming nights may require cold protection. Selecting this link shows a map with a number of black and red dots. Black dots represent former National Weather Service fruit frost station locations. Red dots mark the locations of FAWN sites. You can zoom in and out of the map using the plus and minus signs on the left. Selecting a location on the map produces a graphical forecast at the bottom of the page. You may need to scroll down to view the graph. The graph shows an hourly forecast of temperature, wind speed and direction, and rainfall for a 4-day period. Scrolling right on the graph shows the entire forecast. This type of view allows you to approximate when the temperature is forecasted to reach its minimum value. The next component of the toolkit is the Minimum Overnight Temperature tool. This tool uses the Brunt equation and the air and dew point temperatures at sunset to estimate the overnight minimum temperature. Once official sunset has occurred, a table is shown with the estimates at each FAWN site. You can also submit measurements here to retrieve an estimate at your location. This tool complements the National Weather Service forecast by providing a value based on site-specific conditions. Going back to the main page, we next select the forecast tracker for FAWN sites. The forecast tracker allows you to evaluate in real time how well the National Weather Service forecast agrees with what is actually happening at a FAWN site during individual cold events. In this box, you can select a FAWN site. Once you select a site, 2 lines appear on the graph, and the numerical values of what is displayed appear in this box. Here you can make sure your critical temperature is properly set, or you can change it, and you can display it on the graph by checking this box. The graph shows the FAWN 2-meter or 6-foot air temperature in black, and the National Weather Service forecasted temperature in gray. The FAWN observations are updated hourly, and the forecast every 3 hours. In the middle of the graph is the current time to the nearest hour. To the left of the current time are the FAWN temperature and the forecasted temperature for the previous 24 hours. To the right is the forecasted temperature for the upcoming 18 hours. Comparing the forecasted temperature to the FAWN site temperature allows you to estimate the likelihood that the actual temperature will decrease to the forecasted minimum. If, as time progresses, the actual observations are consistently higher than the forecast, as is the case in this part of the graph, it may be possible that the actual temperature will not decrease to critical levels. On the other hand, if the actual temperature is consistently lower than the forecast, as is the case in this part of the graph, then it may be likely that the actual temperature will decrease to critical levels or maybe even lower. Displaying the critical temperature line on the graph can also give you some idea of when the temperature is forecasted to reach your critical temperature. Once you have a general idea of how the actual observations compare to the forecast, it will be important to evaluate evaporative cooling potential. If plant surfaces are wetted by an irrigation system that is running for cold protection, and the air is very dry and windy, evaporation can occur and can cause the temperature of the plants to decrease to the wet bulb temperature, the lowest temperature to which the air can be cooled by evaporation. When this occurs and the wet bulb temperature is lower than the critical temperature of your crop, further damage can result. FAWN uses the air and wet bulb temperatures and the wind speed to categorize the evaporative cooling potential at each FAWN site. Evaporative cooling potential is shown as irrigation risk. The categories range from low to extreme, and a table near the bottom of the page shows the criteria used to determine each category. NA indicates that the air temperature is significantly warmer than either your critical temperature and/or the wet bulb temperature. The final step in the cold protection process is determining when it is safe to shut down a running irrigation system without risk of further damage. The wet bulb-based irrigation cutoff temperature tool uses the wet bulb temperature to estimate an air temperature at which you can safely shut down your running irrigation system. It is based on the principle that once the wet bulb and your critical temperatures are equal, there is no risk of further damage. This temperature is shown as the safe cutoff temperature. At the bottom of the page, you can submit measurements to retrieve a safe cutoff for your location. FAWN thanks the St. Johns River Water Management District for funding this video and you for using the FAWN website and the Cold Protection Toolkit.